100 222 612. On our Olympic City segment, we're thinking about Expo 88. It helped Brisbane grow up. What did it teach us, and how can a big event change our city forever? That's our conversation this half hour. You can join in 1300 222 612.
The games of the 35th Olympiad are awarded to Brisbane.
Modern, it'll be high-tech, it'll be sustainable, there will not be a bad seat.
Brisbane, we have a problem.
Give us 100 days.
The world doesn't know we exist.
Stop making the Olympics a political football.
Let me tell you, no one's going to be embarrassed.
The new normal is never a destination. It's a plateau for growth.
And with that rousing theme, we declare if it's Thursday, this must be the Olympic City segment. We're considering calling it the Olympic Committee because you and I are on this particular committee. Each week we consider what our great city and region has to offer and how to present ourselves to the world. Today, we're looking through the lens of Expo 88. It was the World's Fair held in Brisbane during the winter of 1988. It blew into town at the end of April, transforming South Bank from this rough industrial wasteland into an international cultural experience. But on Sunday, the 30th of October 1988, it was gone. The Riverside precinct was empty, but Brisbane had changed forever. Do you remember it? 1300 222 612, 1300 222 612. Today, what we're trying to figure out is how it changed the city and what we can learn as we prepare to host the Olympics. Did you live in Brisbane in 1988 and go to Expo? How did it change your expectations of going out in the city? Did you come to expect better restaurants, decent coffee, great outdoor spaces? Maybe it was the moment we began to appreciate the river. And if you weren't in Brisbane in 1988, where's the room for improvement in our city? Go on, I dare you to tell us. 1300 222 612. To guide us through this conversation, we have two Expo tragics, maybe three Expo tragics, I can be the third, who were young back in 1988. Jason Ford, now a TAFE teacher at Kingaroy, was studying to be a chef in South Brisbane, overlooking the site as it emerged from the ground. G'day, Jason.
Good afternoon, Ellen. How are you?
Very well, thrilled to be speaking to you. And Nick Feros, who was 15 years old, a school kid who worked in the French pavilion at Expo. Good to see you, Nick.
How are you going?
Very well. And you both run a Facebook site that helps remember the event. It was very useful in preparing this segment. Now, Jason, let's start with you on the phone in Kingaroy. You've made it in the world now. You're a TAFE teacher teaching commercial cooking, but back then you wanted to be a chef in little old Brizzy. What was it like down at the Expo site and going out in Brisbane? As I remember, everyone was just dropping down drunk in pubs and listening to bad bands.
Yeah, I'd say the dining scene back in the early to mid-'80s was quite backward, I'm sorry to say, quite traditional foods, so there wasn't much exposure to the types of dining we experience today, the modern dining we have. So for me, going to TAFE in the mid-'80s and overlooking the Expo site being constructed, I guess I was in that group of young chefs learning the trade so that we could all be trained ready for the event.
There were jobs to be had because the world was coming to Brisbane, and then you're watching the whole thing come out of the ground. You were too at home. Weren't you, Nick? Because your dad was helping to draw the plans up for it all. Yeah,
so Dad was on the original Bligh McCormack planning committee in 1984, and as a youngster, in that year I caught the plan sitting on Dad's desk for World Expo 88, and it had all the artists' impressions of the fun park, and I went to school and told kids that there's a roller coaster theme park coming to Brisbane.
Wow.
And, it was very exciting times back then.
Yeah. And so describe it. A lot of people have moved to Brisbane in the years since. Describe what it was like on the site when it was finally built.
Yeah, so, I used to go every day after school, and then I kept hovering around the Meccano section in the French pavilion, and the lady there just said to me one day, do you want just a job here helping kids build Meccano? And I've later become a mechanical engineer, so it was quite fitting. And it got me a staff pass, which was very valuable because you could get in before start time and beat the queues to any pavilion that you wanted. Also, I mean, I just remember all the other planning associated at the time. And so, I mean, Brisbane back then, the domestic airport that we have today was originally going to be a combination international and domestic, and they realised soon that it wasn't going to be big enough for purely for both, so they repurposed it purely as a domestic airport back then, and then we had to wait until sort of 1990-ish for our new international airport at the time.
So we're going back to 1988, 1300 222 612. Do you remember Expo? Do you remember Brisbane before? Do you remember Brisbane after? How does a big event like this change a city? This will give us some clues about 2032. We're asking you to not only remember but to analyse how it changed our city. We dug this out, Nick and Jason. This is a government ad produced in 1988 by a very serious young fellow in a hard hat, is on the screen. And they've wiped out all the pubs and asbestos and all the industrial stuff that was sitting on the site here at South Brisbane. And the big sails are up, the monorail is up, and the whole thing's starting to come out of the ground. And they're trying to encourage the world to come to Brisbane. Listen closely to the sales pitch for Brisbane.
Ideally situated to host this spectacular event, Brisbane is located midway between two of the nation's most popular tourist destinations. To the south lies the fabulous Gold Coast, and to the north, the tranquility of the Sunshine Coast. In keeping with the exposition theme of leisure in the age of technology, a futuristic fun park will feature the latest in rides and amusements. Parades, fireworks, laser displays, and non-stop entertainment will add to the fun and excitement.
Okay, so did you pick that up, Nick and Jason? Brisbane, don't worry about Brisbane. You can get to the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast from there. That's the pitch. Sorry, go on.
I actually thought you were going to put the Breaker ad on that was filmed on the Expo site at the time.
But I mean, that was the sales for Brisbane. Like, we got nothing to, like this. You can see them there with the whiteboard, can't you? There's nothing to recommend this joint except you can get to other places from there.
It's the gateway, yes.
That's a shocker. There's been such a change in our perception of Brisbane. Do you remember Expo, the Spaghetti House, the Ship Inn, the Munich Brauhaus, the South Pacific Lagoon, the monorail that they ripped down, the Nepal Peace Pagoda, which is still there, and people from around the world coming to Brisbane? It changed the city. Let's think about how it changed the city. What is the legacy of these big events? Peter's on the line from Bunukin. Peter, why do you think you didn't take advantage of Expo?
Well, I was silly. I only went once a week. And I sort of realised in hindsight that I should have been going almost every single day.
Why did you think that?
Well, just looking back, look at the Facebook page that these two wonderful gentlemen have got operational, and you just see so much entertainment going on. The River Stage was just firing away. I mean, Scott Hutchinson raves about, the current River Stage, but it's not a patch on what was operational during World Expo 88. Just absolutely phenomenal. And then you had the street parades in the morning, and at night time, the Qantas nighttime parade. And, the whole thing just gave an absolute spark to Brisbane. And I'm pretty well sure if we keep our mind focused that the Olympic Games are going to do exactly the same thing.
Okay, let me. You're on the Olympic Committee. You've been elected. Okay, the expectations for what happened in public places changed. That's what you're telling me, isn't it? That we used to socialise in a pub or in a, if you wanted to see theatre, you went inside. But suddenly things were happening outside, and everybody could come together and gather. That's what you're saying to me.
Oh, absolutely. And, I remember the Brisbane City Council was dead set against footpath dining, and Sally Ann had to really grab the bit between the teeth because footpath dining, it's dangerous. Flies might get on your food. If it's, a vehicle may mount a curb and drive into you. And she had a battle royale. And then Jim Sawley had to have the same battle to get footpath dining approved and accepted. I mean, what would Brisbane be now without footpath dining? I mean, it'd just be such a boring place.
And that's fascinating, isn't it? 1300 222 612. Nick Feros is with me in the studio. Jason Ford, who is a chef. They both run the Facebook a site for Expo 88. That's really interesting what he's saying, Nick, because the whole thing was ripped down.
Yeah.
So it's had a legacy, but it was all just temporary. It all just vanished.
Yeah, and then there was a very much a vacuum in Brisbane for a period of time after that, and the public really cried out for that alfresco dining to be reinstated back into the suburbs. And I mean, I remember as a child growing up in West End in the late 70s and 80s, people would try and put tables out on footpaths. The council inspectors would come and take them away, and the whole thing had done a 180 by the end of by 1990. I mean, people like Stefan with JoJo's adding the balcony on in the mall, and Park Road, Milton, the Scoops at Paddington. I mean,
suddenly we're outside.
Yeah, we went outdoors to eat.
Yeah, and we've democratised culture as well. 1300 222 612. 1300 222 612. Taking your calls on how Expo changed Brisbane and what we can learn from that about the legacy of the Olympic Games. If you weren't in Brisbane at the time, maybe you have some views about what we need to change. 1300 222 612. Give me a call, 612 ABC Brisbane, 20 minutes past 5.
The Exxon Valdez supertanker.
Salman Rushdie's The Satanic
The People's Liberation Army have step back to the 80s for the end of an era.
I am excited.
Season 3 of The Newsreader, Sunday nights on ABC TV and streaming on ABC iView.
Catherine, are you there? You're calling from South Bank. It sounds like you're outside having fun. Why do you think Expo did nothing for the city?
Oh, you're talking to me.
Yes.
I've been at the pool with my son.
Well, there you are. That is one of the legacies of Expo.
Well, I just tend to disagree because I've grown up here and I'm fifth generation, and I think we attribute a lot more than... I mean, Brisbane was growing like every other city. And I just think I agree with the gentleman beforehand about footpath dining. There was a struggle with that. But I came back and they'd ripped down all these fabulous buildings that could have been reinterpreted the way they treat Sydney. And it was just this barren place.
That's an interesting perspective. Catherine on the line there from South Bank. Sounds like she's got somebody in the pool down there. What do you think about that, Nick? The idea that, hey, what did we pull down in order to build a new city and a new vibe?
Well, part of South Bank was already being cleared at the time. We had Clem Jones Park along here where the Warana Parade would finish and there'd be rides and stuff like that. And so a lot of this area and QPAC and everything else, the whole industrial area was slowly being cleared. The government at the time had a plan for the area to rejuvenate it and take industry out and bring the people back in. And I think the impetus that Expo gave really rapidly the planning was done in 84 and then we had the Expo in 88. I mean, we're worried about being ready for an Olympics in 2032. I mean, they did that in 4 years. So it was already being cleared. There's a lot of other industrial areas that have survived in Brisbane around Newstead and stuff that are people like the wool stores and things like that were probably far better repurposed for what they are today.
Yeah, my memory of it is there were some nice pubs, but there was a lot of asbestos. Elizabeth's on the line from Camp Hill. You were a uni student and went every day. What was your top memory?
Oh, my top memory. Oh, God, there were so many of them. I loved being able to just go every day. That was because I had the season ticket and I still have it now, which is really lovely. And just to be able to go out and just enjoy just being out and about and the fireworks, all the pavilions. I love there was a chicken dance that we all learned.
Yes, I do remember people doing the chicken dance. Was that unusual for you though, Elizabeth? Because we're trying to analyse how it changed the joint.
Oh, I think it was, because we didn't do the chicken dance before then.
No, but did you go outside? Did you socialise in the way that you did at Expo before it?
I think what it wasn't so much the outside. This is my personal opinion. It was more that it was the 24-hour, that we could just go out whenever. It was a venue, an area that we would gather. Prior to that, I think we had the Queen Street Mall, and it was all in, as you write, inside, but though we had JoJo's and everything on the outside, I think, but it was something that was very much, we could all gather as a community.
That's a really great point, Elizabeth. Let's go to Jason Ford, who's one of the facilitators of the Facebook site for Expo 88, leading us through this conversation. Brisbane stopped closing the doors, Jason, at 5 o'clock. I would say maybe we need to push that a little bit. That's maybe part of what we need to do for the Olympics. We still shut down pretty early on a Sunday round here.
Yeah, it becomes we've got to be careful not to just go into the rabbit hole of the infrastructure, because there's other cultural changes that take place with these mega events. My first job after completing TAFE in 1988 was at a restaurant called New Orleans, which at the time that it opened was the first 24-hour restaurant in Brisbane. And that was a direct result of being ready for the influx of tourism from Expo.
Yes, but I would say to you now, I know you're talking to us from Kingaroy, but you know Brisbane well. I mean, I struggle to get a supermarket if it's 6:01 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. I can't find a supermarket. And people complain that round here where I'm broadcasting, all the chairs are on the table at 9 o'clock. Now, I know people get up early, but maybe that's a change we can expect to see where things are just open longer.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. Also, it's very easy to be nostalgic about events like this, but there's the longer lasting impact on, training people. So, I work for a training provider, and, in the years leading up to, say, the Olympic Games, there's going to be a whole generation or two of people who'll be trained in skills to build the infrastructure to provide the goods and services.
Just like you were. Sam's on the line from Petrie at 24 minutes past 5 on 612 ABC Brisbane. Sam, how did Expo change your outlook on life?
Expo 88 was a pivotal time in my life. Pre that, I shared and had some pretty extreme racist views in the world. Part of my change was immersing myself in Expo 88 on a daily basis or an evening basis, and it offered me a lot more clarity and pretty much changed my life.
And what did you see? What happened to you when you went onto that South Bank site with the great big sails and the world was there, the French pavilion?
I realised that there was way more to the views I expressed in Little Brisbane with the people I was hanging out with. And there was a lot more opportunities and a much more positive shared thought process out in the world, which I wasn't aware of. And
was there any one thing that affected you? Can you remember going to a particular pavilion brought by a particular country in the world and thinking, gosh?
No, but I do remember as soon as I walked through, I was like, wow, this is going to be a big change for me. I just felt it.
So you walk past the Thai pavilion and the Japanese pavilion, the Chinese pavilion, the French pavilion, the German pavilion, and suddenly you're not this provincial kid anymore.
Correct.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sam. That's very generous of you to share that and be so open. I'm loving taking these calls on 612 ABC Brisbane. We're about 3 minutes away from your 5:30 news update and traffic. We'll take more calls after the news, 1300 222 612. How did Expo change you? How did it change your expectations of the city? And what can we learn from that about how big events like the coming Olympics might change us and how we live in this beautiful place? A quick update of the traffic.
612 ABC Radio Brisbane. Traffic. Yeah, thanks, Ellen. We had a breakdown on the Gateway Motorway northbound just around the Depot Road there. That's all been cleared, which is good news. But traffic has been heavy from basically Nudgee this afternoon right through to Bald Hills after earlier breakdowns and also a crash as well. Jim Boomba, minor delays, a single vehicle crash, Mount Lindesay Highway northbound at Camp Cable Road. Got a breakdown in the CBD, minor delays on Edward Street eastbound and Centre Lane blocked after Mary Street. And got a breakdown at Rockley, no delays, Ipswich Motorway inbound, in the left shoulder after Grenard Road. It's been really heavy conditions, Captain Bridge, Riverside Expressway around the city, but outbound towards Greenslopes on the Pacific Motorway after several breakdowns. Traffic's been back to Coronation Drive to Wong, County Street back to Kelvin Grove, and also River Terrace has been solid back to Kangaroo Point as well. Really good run, though, towards the Gold Coast. Just underspeed through Underwood and also thinning out, actually, between Yatlat and Gaven, but that's been basically underspeed as well. The Australian Traffic Network, I'm Brad. More details in about 15 minutes on 6:12 ABC Brisbane.
A minute away from your news service at 5:30 on 6:12 ABC Brisbane. 1300 222 612 is the number. It's our Olympic City segment. You can be part of the Olympic Committee here on 6:12 ABC Brisbane as we prepare for 2032. What did we learn from hosting Expo? It was the event that really saw Brisbane grow up. Better food, it became impossible to get a bad coffee after Expo, better public spaces. And what can Expo teach us about how a big event changes our city forever? 1300 222 612, taking more of your calls. 24 minutes to 6 on 6:12 ABC Brisbane. With me in the studio is Nick Feros. He and Jason Ford, who's on the line. G'day, Jason. Both convened the Facebook site to remember Expo 88, and they've accepted our invitation to come in and be part of your Olympic Committee, which we do each week at this time, to try and work out what Expo 88 taught us about how big events can change the city. Jason, Nick was just saying to me during the news about the role of public art in the city. Prior to Expo, there was just lots of Queen Victoria and so forth. How do you think it changed the physical environment of the city?
Well, the event itself brought art pieces from all over the world. There was some art was commissioned, some was existing art was brought in from all around the world, some of which still remains in the city. So you just, you go for a travel through Brisbane City, you'll see some major art pieces, some which would be priceless today.
And Nick, at the end of it all, it was all gone, and the city had kind of like a hangover, didn't it? It was just this sort of nothingness happening, and everyone was very sad. And the suggestion came to sell off that great big bit of land where it had been. Just the sails were there and some tumbleweeds underneath. And there was an outcry, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there was plans for a World Trade Centre and a casino, and all sorts of things were touted, and it was rapidly becoming the developer's plaything. And then public opinion turned, and it all swung around. And the government of the day, by 1992, had presented us with the South Bank Stage 1, which back then had gondola rides and all sorts of things like that, but lacked a lot of things like disability access. So, and then in South Bank Stage 2, a lot of that was fixed with the Bougainvillea Boulevard that we have nowadays and stuff. I mean, also a lot of retail environment changed in Brisbane at the time. So, I mean, we had the rapidly developed Myer Centre at the time that was developed to open just in time for Expo 88. And if you look at that now, I mean, it's got the tumbleweed blowing through it. Yeah. So I mean, things like Expo, people flocked to the Myer Centre after Expo, and the fun park never got traction, but certainly the Myer Centre became a focal point for the next decade.
So it stress tests what works in public spaces in your city and what doesn't work. You soon find out, and I think we know that the top of the mall really isn't working at the moment. Stephen's on the line from Aspley. How do you think Expo 88 changed Brisbane? What can we learn from it?
Hi, Ellen. I think that Brisbane learned how to queue. Like, I went overseas. I just returned from overseas when Expo was midway through, and I picked up a job as a volley. So I couldn't believe the transformation. And, people would queue orderly for buses or for ferries and queue to get into the most popular pavilions. Everyone was queuing everywhere in Brisbane. You wouldn't see that before Expo. So, I think it proves that if something's worth queuing for, people are quite happy to do it. So I hope we can do that with the Olympics.
And how do you think it changed our expectations of this city? I mean, people were encouraged to gather. Expectations for public places changed. As Nick's just said, there was a small community riot about the idea of handing it over to the developers, South Bank. Do you think it sort of democratised culture in a way? We kind of do life outdoors more, don't we?
Well, I think what Expo did was it was suitable for everyone to go to. I think that's where the inner city is bombing a little bit at the moment, particularly the city centre is, if you've got a family with young kids or if you're elderly with mobility issues or whatever, Expo had a little bit of something for everyone. You could just hang out with your mates, have a drink, do the chicken dance, whatever, or just look at the sights. And I think it brought life, all-day life, to a city that desperately needed it and kind of needs it again now.
Yeah, that's a great point. It kind of needs it again now. Maybe we are getting a little bit jaded post-COVID, post the experiences we've all been through. Andrew, you reckon there was bad with the good. What's the bad?
Well, the bad was that it cruelled the hospitality industry inside the city. Unfortunately, everyone went to South Bank or Expo, and we were there. I was running a very busy nightclub in town, but we wouldn't get anyone in till 12 o'clock at night.
When Expo closed?
When it was, all the staff would go on river cruises, get drunk, and then we'd get them at the end of that at Eagle Street, and then we'd go through to 5 a.m. And
but isn't that just the old venue? The thing that people used to do when transformation happens, they start doing the new thing, and you just got to cop it, Andrew.
Well, we did, and unfortunately, fortunately, my group also had to plough in an Alice's Rock Cafe in the Expo.
Yeah. Okay.
So we were swings and roundabouts. It also cruelled our recruitment for staff. We couldn't get people to work for us.
And we can probably expect that to be happening around the Olympics, right? Because there's going to be a huge demand for people to work. Admittedly, though, it's only a 2-week period, but you've got to imagine that there's going to be a broader transformation. Jason, like there has been you look here, Swiss Fish Lane just around the corner from where we're sitting now. You look over at Goma, the Gallery of Modern Art and so forth. It really has transformed the city in ways that no one could have imagined a 6-month event would.
Yeah, tourism, hospitality certainly has benefited in the decade since. I think these large events also... Another legacy is inspiration for generations of the future who can look back and say, yeah, these large events are possible. They can dream big and do the big things.
Yeah. All right, we have run out of time. Some terrific callers, and I do thank you for standing on. Paul from Carindale had a story for us about the last night. I'm sorry we didn't get to you. Norm is making a bid for the monorail to return. You're about the 20th person to say that to me today. Everybody in the office wants it. And, look, I'll take a quick call from Leon. Go on, Leon. You can be the last caller today. If I can press the button. There you go. What do you remember best about Expo and what do you think should continue into the Olympics? Go on quickly if you can.
Yeah, so no problems. The thing I liked as a New Zealander visiting my parents over here was the number of people that said g'day to me, that greeted me everywhere. I think they'd made a real effort to make me feel welcome. And the other thing I liked was there was a little guy that had a puppet of Bob Dylan, and he was singing, and it was the coolest thing because it was a backing track. This little Bob Dylan puppet was playing the guitar, and he was singing and playing the little harmonica. And I want to know where he is. It was so cool.
Get him back for the opening ceremony, right? Getting back from the opening ceremony. This on the text line. Thank you for the call, Leon. Expo was definitely when Brisbane grew up, but surely Brisbane's adolescence was the 1982 Commonwealth Games. Ian is remembering Expo and saying, well, forget the Olympics, hey? Let's have another Expo. But it's interesting, Nick and Jason, thank you so much for leading us through this conversation both, that it's about your identity, isn't it? Jason, I was speaking to an Indigenous man today who's involved with language revival. We said g'day at Expo 88. Next week I want to think about whether we can start to use Turrbal and Yagara words for g'day. Would you be happy to say Marumba Biggie?
Marumba Biggie.
How about you, Nick?
Marumba Biggie.
That means g'day. That means g'day.
Lovely.
Do you think
I'll remember that.
Righto, Marumba Biggie is what we need to say, and that's g'day in Turrbal and Yagara language, and maybe we can start to introduce some of those bits of language in to really show the world who we are, the longest continuous civilization in the world, and a modern city about to be transformed again. You're looking forward to the Olympics, Jason?
I would love to be involved in some way, to be honest with you. Hopefully,
can you shoot, swim,
volunteer, or something?
Oh, I see.
Well,
I see.
I can run and ride a bike, but I'll be a little bit older by then, so maybe volunteering, I think.
What about you, Nick?
I'm hoping there might be a Masters Games afterwards that I might be able to.
Oh, okay.
Get into some rowing in.
Any particular sort of sport?
Oh, rowing. That's what I do now.
Oh, okay. Masters rowing. You're a glutton for punishment, aren't you? Good on you. I love that image of you with the Meccano sets in the French pavilion, putting it together, and you've turned yourself into...
He still plays with Meccano.
Does he?
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you very much, both. Jason Ford, who was on the line there from Kingaroy. He was a young chef back in 1988, training to be a chef, watching Brisbane transform in front of me. And Nick Feros with me in the studio here, a 15-year-old school kid who worked at the French pavilion. His dad was on the Bligh McCormack design team in 1982 that did the